I was born in 1935 in Winlayton at my grandmother's house, which was next door in those days to the Rose and Crown pub. It was quite normal, I think, in those days for girls to go back to their mothers to have the firstborn. And in fact, the Queen was born at her grandmother's house, so we're in good company there. My mother and father were living in Hexham. But as I say, my mother came down to Winlayton to have me. The house that she lived in was later taken into the Rose and Crown. This is sometime after the war. My association with Winlayton stopped in 1940 when the family took my grandmother up to live with them in Hexham at the beginning of the war. Up till 1940, I used to go down to have holidays in Winlayton with my grandmother, and can still remember the beer barrels going down the trapdoor, down to the cellar of the Rose and Crown. The trapdoor was directly above a front window. The trapdoor's still there. There's a window there, but not the original, and that was my grandmother's front room. Years later, I said to my grandmother, "Remember your bedroom?" She said, "Yes." I said, "Well, it's now the gents' toilet." Living in Hexham during the war, we used to come down to Lowfell to visit my aunt and cousin. My dad's brother was in Burma in the RAF at the time. And one of the things, it was a great event for a country lad to come down to the big city. The big city, of course, starting off in Newcastle. Getting the train from Hexham, and then a choice at the central station of getting a single-decker tram across the high-level bridge and along Durham Road and walk up to Lowfell, or walk to the Odeon, get a double-decker across the Tyne Bridge and along Old Durham Road. Somewhere about the 3 tons from memory, the double tram tracks went down to a single line, and there were pillboxes either side of the road. Again, growing up in Hexham with food rationing, we had ration books, and you allocated so much fat, so many eggs and this sort of thing on a weekly basis. And one of the things at school, we had clothing coupons, and each garment of clothing had a coupon value. At school, we had our feet measured. This was because at a certain time you came from boys' shoes to men's shoes. So if you had big feet, you qualified for extra clothing coupons, and I qualified. Rationing came off at the end of the war, and but sweets were brought back on again because there was a sugar shortage, and I think it was in the early 50s before sweets were taken off the ration. I know we're talking of prior to 1944, but what we did through the war was to collect rosehips for rosehip syrup. And you collected rosehips and you were paid, I think, something like £3 a pound for these. And would collect them in jam jars and take them to school. We had air raid shelters in the schoolyard, and they were only used, fortunately, living in Hexham, they were only used as for practice. But when we did go in for practice, it was a case of being issued with little pieces of chocolate, which was very nice. Also, we went to school with gas masks, fortunately never ever used. In 1956, I was called up for national service and spent the next 2 years in the RAF. Fortunately, I was never posted abroad, but some of the lads in the billet did a tour of duty on Christmas Island, where they were testing the atomic bomb and the H-bomb at that particular time. After 23 years living in Hexham, we now returned to Gateshead in 1959, after 2 years service in the RAF. now married with an 18-month-old son. We bought a pair of flats in Felling, on the bank going down to the square, and managed to get a mortgage on a weekly wage of just over £5. The downstairs flat was occupied, a certain tenant, so we moved into the upper flat, which was vacant at the time. The rent from the downstairs flat was 7 and 6 per week. That's 37.5 pence in today's money. The upstairs flat had 3 bedrooms, a living room, a kitchen, but no bathroom, and toilets were outside in the backyard. Bolts were on the inside and outside of the toilet door, obviously, and one day my wife went to the toilet and our son was playing in the yard and he locked his mother in. He carried on playing, disregarding our calls for help, and fortunately a neighbour did hear after a while and she was released. The flat didn't have central heating. It had a fire in the living room, so in winter time it was a case of getting ready for bed in front of the fire and making a dive into the bedroom. The next morning when you woke up there was frost on the inside of the windows. We managed to put well, that's what you call a head bath into the kitchen, and it was filled via a small gas water heater, and it took an absolute age to fill the bath. We're talking about 1950 now. The school leaving age was 15, and actually I left school at 14 because my birthday was in the summer holidays, and so I started work when I was 15 because I actually waited until after my birthday before I started work. I started work with Lucas, the auto electrical company, and that was in Newcastle. The owner of the garage where my father was manager had suggested or contacted Lucas and said that I had a young lad who was interested in motor vehicles. Anyway, after a couple of interviews I was fortunate enough to be employed by them. The first year's wages was £1 4 a week. So in today's money that's £1 20 pence. That princely sum of £1 4 was for the first year. After that there was very, very small increases. Living at Hexham and travelling to Newcastle for a 5-day week, the train fare was £1 for the week's train fare. My mother gave me 5 shillings pocket money, so she was out of pocket a shilling for the first year. Lucas were on St Mary's Place in Newcastle. They'd been there since 1929. Around about 1964-65, that area was cleared to make way for the Poly, and Lucas then moved to Saltmeadows Road in Gateshead. So here we have the Gateshead connection. We were one of the first units along Saltmeadows Road, and at the time of the move, I believe from memory that the Gateshead Post put an article in the paper to say that there was so many new jobs being created in Gateshead. But in fact there was no new jobs created in Gateshead because the staff moved from Newcastle to Gateshead. When we moved along Saltmeadows Road it was rather isolated. So what they did, they used to send a car along to the Gateshead end of the Tyne Bridge to pick up the office girls and get them along to the works. This went on for quite some time. Over a period of time, the office staff did tend to change, but we kept the same staff for quite a long time. The Saltmeadows Road was developed from then on. I think it was Law's Stores that were close to us, a building built on stilts, and diagonally opposite was Huggett's Crisps. And we could always work out the flavour of the crisps that were being made that particular day. Could be cheese and onion or just salted. Lucas were on Saltmeadows Road until 1991, at which time the business had changed, the business model had changed, so they moved into smaller premises on the Tyne Valley Trading Estate. The company put the phone into the house for us as I was on call, and suddenly we became very popular neighbours with people knocking on the door saying, "Can I use your phone?" As far as entertainment was concerned, we had a small radio which we used, and then later on we managed to hire a TV from Surtees, just down the hill from Felling Square. It was a very, very small screen in a massive cabinet. Later on we got a much larger screen, and in fact it was termed a room-to-room portable television. You needed all your strength to carry the thing from one room to another, and of course there wasn't an aerial in the other room. Later on in this time at Felling, we had twins. They came along in 1965. We used to, again for entertainment, we used to go to the pictures near Felling Square, but we went on separate nights, unless we had a babysitter. And as far as shopping was concerned, a neighbour used to take the twins and look after them while we both went and did the weekly shop. We used to watch the miners. They used to march down the hill down towards Felling Square on their way to the station to get a train to Durham for the annual Miners' Gala. There was bands and banners, all the miners' banners, and very, very well supported. When our son started Feller Park School, there were 3 classes sharing the hall due to leaking roofs in the classrooms. However, from that start, he did get a degree at Newcastle University. As I've already mentioned, the twins came along in 1965. We had a twin high pram which was kept in the entrance, which made it very difficult to open the front door. The milkman used to deliver to the back to help us. Nappies were boiled in a bucket on the gas stove, spun in a small spin dryer. We had a twin tub at the time. That was one that was 2 units were clipped together. If the weather was bad, I used to, when I came in from work, I used to take the nappies down to the laundrette and put them in the dryer. The laundrette was next to the co-op. I used to read the paper while they were going round and round. On fine days, of course, the washing was dried in the back lane. Everyone used to dry their washing in the back lane. But there was a problem if the coal man arrived. It was a case of get the washing in quick, because at times the coal man didn't wait for that to happen. The flat was no longer suitable and hard work with the twins, so we moved to Bladen when they were 18 months old. And later we moved to Crawcrook, so we still have that connection with Gateshead.